For our hadith, inshallah, this is part 2, bi'idhnillah, and the hadith, we'll go over it very quickly because we finished a lot actually in part 1. The hadith itself, this is in the, number 9, and it is narrated by Abu Hurayrah radiyallahu anhu, where he says, سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول ما نهيتكم عنه فاجتنبوه وما أمرتكم به فأتوا منه ما استطعتم فإنما أهلك الذين من قبلكم كثرة مسائلهم واختلافهم على أنبيائهم. This is what I have forbidden you, avoid. What I have ordered you to do, do of it as much as you can. For verily, it was only the excessive questioning and their disagreeing with their prophets that destroyed the nations that came before you. We talked about the issue of asking questions. Asking questions is not forbidden. Frequent questioning and differing. And sometimes the purpose of the question is to differ. So a person might, instead of differing, he says, oh, what about this? What about... And the question itself is meant to disrupt. It's meant to be disrespectful. It's meant to be whatever. And they would ask questions to their prophets. And this is similar to the story of the cow, where they were belittling his commandment. Like, what are you telling us to slaughter? We talked about this. So for our purposes as Muslims, we should avoid asking questions before we learn about whatever's being discussed. Because sometimes we feel like, when the information is coming, wait until all the information is delivered, or you read a little bit about the thought, and then you can ask questions, usually speaking. Sah? This is number 1. Avoid asking questions of hypotheticals that will not happen. Avoid asking questions that seem to be disrespectful. Avoid to ask questions that seem superfluous or so on and so forth. However, if you look, Abdullah ibn Abbas and many other companions, when they were asked, how did you gain the knowledge that you did? He said, بِلِسَانٍ سَؤُولٍ وَقَلْبٍ عَقُولٍ. He said, I got it with a tongue that frequently asked questions, and with a mind with a heart that absorbed the information. He wanted to. He had a thirst for knowledge, and that's good. But he's saying that he asked questions. But if you look at his questions were actually thoughtful. They were on point. They were good. It wasn't frequent. He would go to some of the companions' homes, and he'd be like, hey, what do you know of the Prophet ﷺ that he said about this? That's a very good question to ask about something that the Prophet ﷺ would have said, or something that he would have done, or his actions, etc. Those are good questions that a person should ask. But when we think about the question itself and we formulate it properly, I think a lot of times we can formulate our questions better. By the way, in answering questions, there are entire books that are dedicated to adab al-fitya, the manners of answering questions. Because the same mufti, the same person who's answering the question, will tailor a different answer to different people. And this happened even to the Prophet ﷺ. A man comes, Ya Rasulullah, ayyul a'mali ahabbu ilallah. Which of the deeds is most beloved to Allah? And the Prophet ﷺ has given at least 4 different answers to the same question, to 4 different people. Why? Because each person is unique, and each person needed something different. Now, is one of them better than the other? Maybe, and you can make an argument. By the way, this is an old classical discussion between the scholars, but the point being is that sometimes we'll give different answers to different people based on their circumstances and based on their questions. And by the way, I would venture to and they've said this before, that most of the people who ask questions already know the answer, especially when they're asking a mufti. Shaykh, is it allowed for me to do 1, 2, and 3? The fact that you're asking maybe shows that you already know that you shouldn't be doing this, right? So a lot of times, and the mufti realizes this, so they have to, how can we better compel the person to submit to the teachings and to whatnot, and better convince him that this is the right course of action. Some people ask out of a sense of religiosity, a sense of taqwa, and that should be accommodated. Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, very famously answering the girl. There was a girl who was writing in her home at night, and people outside, there was the public security guards that would be walking the streets of the Baghdad at the time would have torches, and they would be walking through the street with the torch, lighting up the whole area. So she asked, is it permissible, look at her question, she said, is it permissible for me to write on my paper and ink using the light from the security officer's lamp? Okay, it's a very like, what most of us would never even ask such a question. Okay, so Imam Ahmad realized what is she asking? She has an added sense of religiosity, taqwa, where she feels guilty using public sources of wealth to fund something that she's doing for her own personal use. Now, that is actually a good thing. We shouldn't be using things that are for the public use, for private use, 100%. But with the light, nobody's going to hold you accountable for the light. But he told her, his answer to her, and he realizes this. So he wrote this in his book, that this is an example of a question that he was asked to demonstrate this. And he tells her, for you, yes, it's better if you use your own lamp than using the lamp that's used in the street. Because you don't want to, and she understood and she did that. By the way, similar to this, I remember and this actually happened at Masjid Rahman. A man came, his phone died, came into the masjid to pray, plugged in his phone into the wall outlet at the masjid, charged his phone, and then came, and I guess he felt guilty using the electricity of the masjid. He said, Sheikh, is it allowed for me to charge my device using the masjid's electricity? It's not even. If you actually, how much? It's like 50, not even, it's like 25 cents to the full charge. I think they've done the calculation, right? You can look it up. It's not even that much. But he felt guilty. So I told him, Akhi, look, it's not, nobody's gonna ask you, are you stealing, siphoning electricity from the masjid? Astaghfirullah, don't you know this donation? Aslan, it's donated for the use of the Muslims. Bil'aks, for you to come and use it, not a problem. The people donated it for that cause, if you think about it. Then I told him, look, if you want to replace it, you can give donation something. Oh, how much should I give? How much you feel like you should give? I can't tell you. They want you to tell, and they're like, no, Sheikh, give me a number. Oh, I'm not going to give you a number. It's whatever you want to give. I can't, and I'm not going to limit, your thing. So you'll have that added sense of wara can be accommodated, but I think we need to make it clear to the person that this isn't the rule. So by the way, just to be clear, like if you charge your phone, that's halal, that's not a problem, because it was donated for the use of the Muslims. If you need it, you need it. That's not a problem. Nobody's going to hold you accountable to that. Right? But if you have that added sense of wara, where you don't want to, okay, khalas, that's fine. That's your prerogative. Sah? So when people ask questions, we have to kind of look at what's behind the question. This is similar to things that happen in our da'wah. If a person comes up to us and he says, why did your prophet, Anwar, you seem like a nice guy. Let's say his name is Bob. You guys work together. Anwar, you seem like a nice guy. But man, I read this thing online. Your prophet, he married a 9-year-old. Like, what's up with that? What happened? What's the actual question? Is he asking about Aisha radiallahu anha? Is this really like a concern? Does he know anything about her? Does he know anything about the Prophet ﷺ himself? His lifetime? Nothing, right? So what's the actual question? Bob is generally a nice guy. He's a co-worker. What's the question behind the question? Yeah. And if so, why, would a correct or a real religion allow something like this? Right? So he's kind of asking, what's your religion almost? You know what I mean? Like, the question is almost like, if your religion is correct, how could this happen? So you have to prove that Islam is correct. You can spend the next 30 minutes talking about, puberty, coming of age, the environment, diets. You can talk about, this is happening here in the West up until 100 years ago. How old were they when they were getting married? His own grandmother was probably that old when she got married. Yeah, anyway, I'm just exaggerating, but you guys get the point. Or we could bypass all of that and actually answer the real question, which is, tell me about your religion. This seems messed up, but you seem like a nice guy. Right? And he's trying to so okay, let me tell you. Thank you for asking that, Bob. I can see, this is a common thing that, I can see why this would be very concerning. In fact, it would be concerning to me if it happened in this day and age, 100%. But let me tell you a little bit about our faith, and that will help clear the misconception. How does that sound, Bob? Bob was like, wonderful. So it's like, in Islam, we believe in God. Do you believe in God, Bob? He's like, of course. Okay, perfect. And then you move on from there. Now we're having a conversation. We're going to talk about Tawheed for a little bit. We're going to talk about the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So similar to this, we can answer a lot of questions and realize what is actually the underlying question. Which takes, you have to kind of listen. It's not easy to hear, you know what I mean? And I'm sure doctors do it all the time. We do it in almost every business. When people ask certain questions, there's always something else behind the question. So look into that, inshallah ta'ala. طيب, the first part of the hadith is also very important, which we did not cover. And it's a very simple rule, 2 rules. The Prophet says, مَا نَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْهُ فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ. Whatever I prohibit you from, stay away. And whatever I command you, do of it as much as you can. So, number 1, prohibitions are to avoid, and there's no middle ground. So like, for example, when it comes to alcohol, it says فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ. And even the Quran says فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ, right? There's no middle ground. You can't say, well, I only drink a little bit. I used to get drunk every day, but now because I know that it's haram, I'm just gonna like a little bit here and there, tastefully drunk. Astaghfirullah. But you'll hear this from people. I've had conversations with people that are like, oh, this is because people can't control themselves. They just carried away, blah, 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 etc. La. In Islam, if it's haram, you stay away 100%. There's no middle ground. Right? Now, the opposite is not true. With commandments, it's not 100%. With a commandment, it's not like I either pray all my prayers or I don't pray at all. La. You pray, obviously we should be praying all of them, right? But they're always according to ability. If a person is traveling or is under difficult circumstances, they can combine. Sah? We can combine our prayers 100%. You're in a difficult situation, you can combine. Many sick people come, from the hospitals. They're like, Sheikh, it's so hard to pray, etc. I'm in the hospital bed, I'm bedridden, etc. You can combine. Really? Yes, you can combine. Every single Muslim scholar has allowed that. Now, they vary in terms of how strict they are. I'm on the more not strict side. If you need to combine, combine. Because your salah is more important than you finding the difficulty. It's not meant to be difficult. مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ. The deen was not supposed to be difficult. Right? It's meant to actually make you better, connect you with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, if you can't pray standing, you can pray sitting. You can't pray sitting, you can pray lying down. You can't pray lying down, that means you're unconscious, you don't have to pray. You pray with your eyes if you need to, right? Let's say you are unconscious. Let's say a person goes into a coma for 3 days and they wake up. Do they need to make up those prayers? What do you guys think? هل يجب عليه الإعادة؟ لا يجب عليه الإعادة. He doesn't have to make them up. What's the threshold? And by the way, the proof is, you know what the proof is? نعم? Yeah, they lost their mind, so there's no, لا يكاد, رفع عنه القلم, صح? This is one proof. Another proof that, because some people might say, well, he can make them up, like if he wants to, sure. But they did a qiyas on a menstruating woman. She makes up fasting, but does not make up salah. However, which one is more important in our deen? Salah or siyam? Salah, without a doubt. طيب, why? Because making up salah is an added burden that Islam doesn't hold her to. Whereas the fast, it can be done anytime. But the salah, it would add an unnecessary burden upon the individual. This is why the criteria, now the threshold is roughly 24 hours, 5 daily prayers. If a person is out, unconscious for more than that, they don't have to make those up. But if it's less, like if they miss like 3 or 4, you can make those up. That's not a problem. Even then, many modern scholars like Ibn Uthaymeen and others have said, if a person loses their ability ukada, they don't have to. If it's one prayer, maybe you can make that up, right? But if it's like more than that, you don't have to. It wasn't your fault. Surgeries, etc. But a lot of people, as they get out of surgeries and stuff, they'll as they regain consciousness, they can pray. Whatever they miss, they can combine, etc. So, anyways, the point being here is الطاعات على الاستطاعة والمحرمات على الاجتناب. Any prohibitions are avoidance. There's no gray area. It's black and white on prohibitions. And on acts of worship, it's always according to ability. Zakat, ability. Siyam, ability. If I can't fast, you don't fast. In fact, if you fasted and it harms you, you're sinful. Hajj, ability. وَهَكَذَا سَائِرْ الطَّاعَاتِ. Every single good deed is according to ability. And it's according to your ability, you're the judge of that. A person might feel guilty. Yeah, Sheikh, I feel guilty sitting down on a chair where, I can stand, I can do this, but I feel guilty. Don't feel guilty. It's according to ability. If you can't, you can't. Right? And there's other ways of doing it. So the beginning part of the hadith is talking about these things, your own ability. What does that have to do with the asking questions and so forth? Is that some people want to put the burden of the judgment of their ability on the scholar. And we'll end with this point. This is the relationship between the beginning part of the hadith and the last part. Is that he knows that maybe I can push myself, but I want someone else to tell me that I don't have to push myself further. So I'm going to put it on the sheikh. He's the one who said that I don't have to do this and this and this. Or he's the one who said that I have to do this and this is why my life is difficult. And this is why I'm telling you, a lot of times you're the best judge of your own situation and do it. Yakhil Islam sahl. It's easy. It shouldn't be a burden. It shouldn't be. And don't try to we should try to get out of that habit of putting the responsibility of the judgment of whatever it is that we're going through on someone else instead of, you don't remove it from yourself aslan. Even on the day of judgment, you're still accountable. As we think that, the sheikh is the one who told me, so it's on him. The people who go fatwa shopping and stuff, and it's terrible. We had a guy who went fatwa shopping for the controversial act of conceiving using eggs that were donated by another woman. His wife can't have kids. So can they borrow the eggs from another woman, implant them in his wife, right? Or do the in vitro, fertilization, etc., and then have a kid that way. What do you guys think? It's haram. Why? Yeah, biologically that's not her kid. It's not her son. Okay? So the brother asked in the city that he was in, the imam of his masjid, no. The imam of the other masjid, no. The imam of the other masjid, no. Went outside of the city. Everybody told him no. Went outside of the country. Asked back home, his home country. Everybody told him no. Asked, so he's Palestinian, just to be clear. Asked in Jordan, they told him no. Asked Saudi Arabia, they told him no. Asked in Egypt, they told him no. He called Sudan. And he got a yes. And his relative that was telling me about because I heard that, but I don't know how, the relative that told me, he's like, I don't think the Sudanese sheikh understood what he was asking. Right? He got a yes, he found one. Khalas, it's on the sheikh. I got a fatwa, it's halal, let's do it, honey. And they did. Allah musta'an. If you want something, you can justify almost anything. And that's what the hadith is really warning us about doing. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us and to guide us, to forgive us for our shortcomings and our sins. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Yeah, go ahead. Inshallah. Yeah, go ahead. No. Yes, 100%. Yes. It's not an all or nothing. Sunan, no, they're not an all or nothing. You do as much as you can. It's not a problem. No. صح صح مظبوط صح صح 100%. Yep. صح. Yes. Yeah. He's talking about people who will call for fatwas back home versus asking here locally. And says a lot of sheikhs now are realizing this problem. So be like, wait, you guys have imams over there. Just ask him. Why are you asking me? I've never heard of this issue. And that's true. I can't judge something I've never heard of or never experienced. Yep. Jazakallah khair. Barakallah feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.